Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the November 2024 edition of the St. Louis Java Users Group. Next slide. For those who don't know, the St. Louis Java Users Group is an informal group. Our first meeting was in May of 1997, so we've been around here for a while. Attendance is free. We don't have any formal membership list. And normally we try to meet on the second Thursday of every month except December, when there is no meeting. There's just too many things going on over the holidays for us to organize a meeting in December. For those who are joining us in person, you can join us for food and social at 6 p.m. And we aim to try to start the presentations here for the meeting at around 6:30. This live stream is originating from the Object Computing Incorporated training room, and we're at 12,140 Woodcrest Executive Drive. That's Suite 310, and of course, that's in St. Louis, Missouri. Okay, next slide. I'd like to introduce the other members of the St. Louis Java Users Group Steering Committee. So from left to right, we have Zach Klein, Ted Doyle, Robert Levitt, Wei Chi Gao, I don't see him here tonight, and Bruce Alspaw, that's me doing the announcements. You can email all of us on the steering committee if you send an email to that address that's at the bottom of your screen. That's javasigsc@googlegroups.com. We have a little Google group for the steering committee. All right, next slide. The St. Louis Java Users Group would not be possible without the support of our sponsors. So from left to right, we have Object Computing Incorporated. They have been with us since the beginning, since 1997, and they've bailed us out so many times. In fact, they've sponsored the pizza here tonight, as well as allowed us to use their training room so that we can meet in person. Tech Systems is a recruiter, and they have been here in the past, and they have sponsored the pizza. So if you are looking to hire a Java developer, or if you have, or you're looking to find a Java job, look up Tech Systems and let them know that you found out about them through the St. Louis Java Users Group. As I mentioned, at the end of this meeting, we will be raffling JetBrains licenses and a couple of Manning ebooks, but again, you must be present to win either online or in person for that after the presentation. Enterprise Mobility has also sponsored food for us, as well as Oracle, believe it or not. We've got, yes, they have done that as well. So, and I believe we also have some other people who may have some job openings in addition to what Enterprise Mobility had. So I'm going to hand the microphone over here to Lawrence. Tell us about what you know.
My friend Dennis used to work for a consultancy called Improving, but he lives in Illinois, and that was too far of a drive for him. But they are still on good terms with him, even though he doesn't work there anymore. And they are hiring Java developers, contracting with MasterCard in O'Fallon, Missouri, not Illinois, on site. I think they're hiring up to 5 people. I might be wrong. I'd have to ask Dennis, but if you want to know more, come to Code and Coffee the next Sunday and talk to Dennis.
All right, thank you, Lawrence. And we also have an announcement from OCI. Hey, Jeff.
I was trying to take it from you. Good.
Let me
Thank
get
you.
into the picture.
Thank you very much.
Get on the video.
All right. My name is Jeff Brown, and I'm a partner here at Object Computing. Bruce mentioned that this group started here in May of '97. I didn't know it was May of '97, but I also started here in '97, in October of '90. In fact, 27 years ago this month is when I started at OCI. And the reason, a big part of the reason that I came to OCI is from the very, very beginning, OCI was very, very committed to the JVM. In 1996, I wasn't here, but OCI already had Java training available. Shortly after that, this Java SIG Java User Group was launched. OCI has been committed to open source the entire time. They've been committed to the JVM the entire time. And OCI is a tremendous place to work. As I said, I've been here since 1997. Today at lunch, we had, this room was full. At lunch today, we had just our monthly all hands meeting, and we always celebrate anniversaries. And there's a whole column of people who are celebrating their double-digit anniversaries. Kevin Stanley is another one of our partners. He was celebrating his 29th anniversary here. So that long long tenure that a lot of folks at OCI have really stands out. In particular, in technology, it's not that common for people to stay at a job for 29 years, 27 years, whatever it is. OCI is a really, really great place to work. An opportunity that we've got right now that I want to let folks know about is we've got an opportunity for a senior Java developer working in microbiology and molecular biology space. You don't have to have any biology expertise at all. What you need is Java development expertise. I'm just going to give you some broad strokes for the kind of attributes that are required for the job. I encourage you to reach out to hr@objectcomputing.com if you think you might be a good fit. I'm going to start. The first thing here says 6 years experience. If I were you and I had 4 years of experience and I otherwise felt like this was a good opportunity, I would contact HR. It may be the case that you're a good fit for this opportunity. It may be the case that you're a good fit for other opportunities and be good to have you on the radar. So I'm just going to give you an idea. So 6 years experience, 1 to 2 years in technical leadership is what we're looking for this role. Full stack Java developer, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Spring Boot and Tomcat, kind of standard JVM, full stack stuff. Experience with multi-threading in Java is a really good to have. Hibernate in Postgres. Experience with Agile. The ability to perform code reviews and provide guidance and mentoring to other folks on the team, other developers on the team. It's really important that you've got critical thinking skills and a strong attention to detail. And a short list of just bonus things that are just really nice to have. If they're not on your list, don't let that discourage you. If you've got experience working in an FDA regulated industry, that's a big win. Experience working with distributed teams, experience with Angular or JavaFX or GWT, any of those. Jasper reports, experience with automated testing frameworks. Groovy is a nice to have. Experience with Git or Perforce as version control systems, and experience with build tools like Gradle. As I said, if that doesn't exactly fit you, but you feel close, please reach out to hr@objectcomputing.com, and we'd love to have a conversation and figure out if there's a way for us to work together. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you all very much for your time. Thank you all for being here and being in person here tonight. As I said, today this room was full for our all hands meeting, and it's just really exciting to have this room full of people. For many years, this room was full all the time. For a few years, it wasn't full, and we're really appreciative of folks coming here. So thank you for coming here tonight. Lawrence?
Can you confirm if there's any code still in Perforce or if it's all Git?
The question was, can I confirm that there's still code in Perforce or is it all Git? And the answer is no. I cannot confirm. I don't know. So the fact that they've got Perforce on the list tells me that there's probably code in Perforce, but I don't know the answer to that for sure. All right. Bruce, is this you or? All right. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff.
Absolutely.
And another thing you could probably do here, Jeff, is if you go to our meetup group, that's meetup.com/gatewayjug, there is a discussion forum there. And I've been posting things like job announcements and things like that. So that might be another good place to post job announcements there. So feel free to do that. Okay, next slide. So as far as announcements go, Manning is one of our sponsors, and they have a 40% off any product if you use that discount code JUG13 when you do a checkout out of their online store. Okay, next. So I mentioned that there is no December meeting, but we are working on meetings for starting in January of 2025. So this is our last meeting for 2024. And preliminarily, at least, we have Hands-on Maven 4 by Chandra Gunter, and he is one of the organizers of the New York Java SIG and the Garden State Jug. And so he'll be attending. We'll be meeting in person here in this training room like we do always, and also we'll have the live stream like we do always. But I believe he will be, because he can't fly out here, he will be attending this meeting remotely. The people at OCI tell me that they can make that happen. So we can be in the training room and they should be able to hear Chandra and everything and ask questions and all of that. So that should be able to work.
If Peter thinks if I can be here for that presentation, just if you're here, really grill him on questions. Like if you could, just like read up on Maven 4 beforehand and just like really ask obscure questions. Like that would do me a huge favor. He's a good friend of mine, but just. Thank you.
I already have some questions ready for him
Good.
when it comes to how do you use Maven 4 to build Java modules. Remember Project Jigsaw? And can you do multiple release jar files? MR jars with Maven 4. Can we do that? And I think the answer may be it's still not there yet.
Yeah, that's some good questions to ask.
Yeah, that's the really tough stuff. And things like how do you solve dependency hell?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, do you have a solution for me there? Okay, and then for March, I'm working on an all-code introduction to domain-driven design and hexagonal architecture by Jeremy Davis of Red Hat. And it's possible I may have another speaker I'm working on for February, and it's possible I might have to swap the January, February around in order to make that schedule work out, but we've got them. All right, next. So if you want to keep up with our presentation schedule, that's easy to do. Just go to our meetup group. That's meetup.com/gatewayjug. And as we schedule presentations, they're posted and you can go ahead and RSVP for them. In fact, you can RSVP for these right now if you'd like. Now, these meetings are being recorded, as you can tell. And so I've just been uploading those to my YouTube channel, and it's at that YouTube address right there with my name. Now, if you're interested in giving a presentation or in becoming a Jug sponsor, we're always looking for more sponsors. Just send an email to the steering committee at that same address I gave you before. That's javasigsc@googlegroups.com. Okay, next slide. So with that, I think I'm ready to hand things over here to our speaker here tonight, Billy from I like to call him our sister Jug over in Kansas City at the other end of the state, at the other end of I-70, who organizes the Jug there, as well as the Kansas City Developer Conference, KCDC. I don't know, when is that going to be next year?
August 13th through 15th.
Okay, all right. So let me know and I'll post some announcements about that so people know. All right. Well, thank you very much. Well, take it away here, Billy.
All right, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming out. And of course, thank you, Bruce, for inviting me, and also Jeff and OCI for hosting. So let me get over here. And yeah, we're going to be talking about Java 23 and beyond. As mentioned, my name is Billy Korando, Java developer advocate at this little company called Oracle, but don't hold that against me. So some very important information. Please, at any point, ask questions. The reason I'm here is so you can learn about Java 23. So if there's any more depth you want me to go in on a subject, ask a question. I've given this presentation many times, so it doesn't bother me if someone asks a question at any point. And then luckily, one of the great things about the Jug format is that, we don't have like some sort of hard stop. If you have any questions later on, feel free to email me at billy.korando@oracle.com. Not on too much social anymore, but it looks like maybe Blue Sky might be the thing to go to now that Twitter is finally dying. So might actually get back on something like that. Blue Sky, yeah. It was made by actually the guy that originally started Twitter. What's his name? Whatever it is, but all the same, that seems to be where a lot of people are going now. Maybe I'm not there yet. That doesn't matter. But what does matter is also if you want to go back to this presentation, it's at this link, and I'll also make sure to share it with Bruce as well. Actually, I already did share it with Bruce, so yeah, we'll post it into the meetup page. Other important news: Java 1 is coming back, so that's going to be actually just about 4 months from now, March 17th through 20th at Redwood Shores, California. So that's just San Francisco area. But follow along at oracle.com/Java1. We should be probably posting speakers and sessions here within the next month or two. So, but of course, we know a few good Java developers, so it should be some pretty good content there. If you'd like to know more, we have a lot of great locations. So we have dev.java. So we have a lot of tutorials. So like, again, if some of the content that I'm talking about here looks pretty interesting, chances are we're going to have a tutorial or some additional content on it. So you can also check it out there. Also, if you're looking to get in speaking, we also have a community page. So that's how you can find like all the jugs around. So like St. Louis Jug is on there, KC Jug is on there, and other jugs all around. So there's actually a lot of great jugs not too far from here if you're actually kind of getting interested or just want to kind of get involved with other communities. There's insight.java. That's where we aggregate like a lot of articles that like our JDK engineers write. So, if there's something like we talked about ZGC here at some point, like, we will probably post an article from like our GC engineers that work on that. If you want to kind of know some more depth, we also have our YouTube channel and podcast. All right. So for the agenda, we're going to first do so how many people here are on JDK 8 still as like their primary Java production? Okay. JDK 11? JDK 17? 9. Okay. JDK 21? 1? Okay. Well, that's good to see. So as I've been doing these presentations a lot, I remember, I felt like last year, like last summer or something, I was doing a few presentations where I'd ask that question, and it felt like about half the people or so would raise their hand to being on Java 8. So I'm actually very happy to see just how much the industry has started to move towards Java 17. Granted, this is a somewhat self-selecting group of people who are very much more enthusiastic and interested in Java, but all the same, it's good to see that transition. Still, it'd be kind of good to review maybe some of these features in the upgrade you haven't noticed yet. If not, you can just kind of look through them as well. But then we'll get into some of the features that have been added since Java 17. All right. So the first feature I want to cover is text blocks. This was added in Java 15. And the JEP for this is 378. JEP stands for JDK Enhancement Proposal. So whenever there's a somewhat substantial change that's being made to the JDK, in this case text blocks, it goes through this JEP process. So if you go here to OpenJDK org/JEPs and JEP 0, this shows you all of the different JDK enhancement proposals in various states. Here's like draft JEPs, submitted JEPs, ones that have already been delivered. So in this case, if I was to put in 378 to the end of this, that would take me to this page. And then this gives you a lot of detail on that specific JEP. So, if I wanted to go through in all the detail on each of these JEPs I'll be covering, we would be here until, around lunchtime tomorrow. I don't think you're quite that interested, but there is some feature that you are interested in and want some more depth on. I include the JEP, if it is in fact a JEP feature, on there so you can have a way to actually get a bit more depth on it. So text blocks, what they simply are is a two-dimensional string. The JVM internally, it doesn't treat these any differently as far as like the underlying representation as a string compared to like the standard one-dimensional, just single double quote string. But one of the benefits of text blocks beyond being two-dimensional, so you don't have to constantly do the appending and plussing of them, is it also relaxes the formatting of it. So right now, it's based on just what you see is what you get, basically. So the actual formatting, the tabbing, and all of that will remain. So if I was to do like system out print line on it, it would look exactly like this as printed. And that's very helpful because even like this simple JSON message, if I actually wanted to print it out this way with just using one-dimensional strings, like I would be needing to escape all these double quotes. I'll be needing to include new line characters. I'll be needing to include tab characters. And that becomes very difficult to maintain. Again, even in this simple example. And then if we were to go back and edit it or something, maybe we add like middle name or something, it could be very easy to forget to include a comma. And then all of a sudden you would have a bug in production. So a goal of a lot of these changes that have been added to Java in recent releases kind of, being post Java JDK 11 or maybe I guess post JDK 8, is about improving or simplifying and making the code more concise. Often a critique of Java, not unfairly, is that it can be somewhat verbose. So, this is less verbose, but the purpose of reducing the verbosity isn't just to reduce the typing, because like the amount of time it would actually take to type this, whether you're doing it as a one-dimensional string or a two-dimensional string, is trivial. But the amount of time it takes to actually understand and maintain this in this way versus using a one-dimensional string is much easier. And that's going to be a consistent theme, is a lot of these changes, it makes it both easier to read and understand, and also then subsequently easier to maintain. It's less error prone, less ways of, stepping on a landmine and introducing a bug into production. So I think these are a lot of really great changes that have been made. Yes.
The line-ins are all style. They're not going to be Windows on the box.
Yeah. Sorry.
The line-ins are not going to be Windows style line-ins on a Windows box. They're going to be Linux style /ins on the consistently across.
Yeah. So the JVM, it will handle the different platform differences. Like this would render the same on Windows as it would on Linux based upon the platform specifics of it. Yeah.
I think what he's getting at
Okay.
is carriage return line food, which is the way I believe it's convention.
Oh, the special characters.
It's only a line for your line breaks when you type that. And since Java's write once run anywhere.
So it would be, so I think underlying it between this, it would be the equivalent of whatever the /n. And so how that would render between Windows and Linux would be the same as it would be if you actually put the new line character in there. So I can't remember offhand what the difference between Windows and Linux would be, but that's what it would be. That's how it would be interpreted by the
And
JVM.
how is it handling the indenting? Is there white space in front of that open and closed parentheses or not? Or is it just
Okay.
starting the line?
Yeah, so the,
Brings up the question: are tabs 4 or are they 2?
yeah, so it's a bit complex, but kind of basically what you would want to do, the simplest thing is the enclosing triple quotes, you would want that to line up with the left margin of wherever you wanted to print from. So here, this white space would be ignored, and it would only start from here. There is some complexity if you get into that, and that's, again, where actually going in and reading the JEP would be more useful than kind of getting into all the specifics on it. And actually, I'll probably write is where the triple quotes are actually after this curly brace, just because actually this is adding an additional new line to the end of it. But yeah, I mean, I think this is, again, probably the reasons I also kind of reference these JEPs, is then it actually kind of goes into some of the specific formatting details. I mean, it's overall pretty intuitive, but like if you really get into it, there could be like some things, and there can also be some weird things you can get into if you really wanted to try it, but it's mostly intuitive. Yes.
And it's Unicode 8 or Unicode 16?
It's based upon whatever the JDK is based on. So actually, I think with JDK 24, it's updating to Unicode 16. But yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
It's like UTF-8 or something, which is generally what the web uses.
yeah, so I can't remember. At some point, we went to UTF-8 by default, sometime between 17 and 21, I believe, or in some semi-recent release, we went to UTF-8 by default. But I mean, this is happening at the JDK or JVM level. It's happening at a level below what the text block stuff is
Okay. So there's some setting you can put in.
Yeah, you can define which one you want to use. It's UTF-8 by default now, but yeah, you can define other ones for it if you need to. Yep. Okay. Any other questions about? Next is switch updates, and these were added in Java 14 with JEP 361. So switch update, there's two major changes. First is the addition of the arrow syntax. And with the arrow syntax is that now if a case is matched on, only the code to the right of the arrow syntax is executed. With the old colon syntax before, like that would have fall through by default. And so what that would mean is that you would often have to include a break statement after every case execution, because rarely was a case that you would actually want to have that fall through by default behavior. And so what, again, this kind of gets back to the point of making this code more concise. This, it's very obvious what's happening. It matches on 1, it prints out Sunday. It matches on 2, it prints out Monday. if I was to write this with the colon syntax, which I used to have on here before I kind of simplified this portion down, like it kind of took up the entire screen to write that out. And obviously that becomes very dense and distracting to look at. And also it's also opportunities for introducing bugs. You could be going in and refactoring the code or making some sort of change. And maybe for some reason you comment out break statement either intentionally for testing purposes or unintentionally for whatever reason, and you don't realize that you push it to production, and then all of a sudden you have a bug. Now there's not an opportunity for actually introducing such a bug. Yes? No, you must choose either arrow or colon syntax. Colon syntax is still valid. Colon syntax is also not going anywhere. We'll continue to support it forever, presumably, or for the far foreseeable future. But yeah, you can't combine the two. Also, if you did need some more complex statement where you had multiple lines that needed to be executed, you could just wrap that in a curly brace next to the arrow, and then that block of code would be executed. Yes?
Can the compiler give you a warning if you haven't covered every case?
So yes, yeah, it would give you actually a compiler error if you haven't covered every case, but that wouldn't be the case with this. So this is written as a statement. So as you can see, I'm just doing a print line for all these. And of course, if I'm not covering every case, well, the code can continue executing because it doesn't need to actually match on a case. But to your point, if I was to write this as an expression like I am right here, in this case, I'm yielding, I'm setting the value based upon which case to match, it would need to be exhaustive here. So if you're on, as many people are here on Java 17, typically what that's going to mean is you're going to need to include some sort of default case. There's a couple examples before Java 21 where you wouldn't necessarily need to include a default case, but generally the case is you would need it. We'll get into later on into Java 21 when you may not always necessarily need a default case and how actually that could be very useful to the point Bruce is kind of bringing up there, but we'll get to that later. Next is sealed hierarchies or sealed classes, but I think sealed hierarchies is a little bit more accurate to what is actually going on. These were added in Java 17. So a sealed hierarchy, what it is doing is it allows a class to define what classes that can extend off of it. So in this example, I have a user hierarchy. So my class user, and I'm saying, okay, only admin, customer, and guest can extend off of it. And when you do that, then these classes, you would either need to declare themselves as non-sealed, as I do with customer here, final, as I do with guest, so non-sealed, that effectively makes it like a normal class. Anything can get extend off of customer. Then we also have final, and that's not new. Nothing can extend off guest, or the class can be declared as sealed itself, as I have with admin, where only normal admin and super admin are the only two classes that can extend off of admin. And you also notice here, up here, I'm using permits, and here I'm not. So you would use the permits clause when you're going to be referencing classes in different source files from the file where you're declaring a sealed hierarchy. Or if you declare the classes within the same source file, then the compiler automatically assumes those are the only classes that can extend off of it. So you would choose either one. You can't mix and match these either. But yeah, this is very useful. Like within Java 17, it's not super useful yet, but one thing that it is useful for if you're just on Java 17 is it's good for communicating domain concepts, because like at every organization I've been at, there's always certain domain things, transaction types, user types, order types, whatever it might be. And it can be kind of difficult to be like, okay, there's only like 4 different like transaction types or something, but you couldn't really define that in code, or you couldn't really enforce that in code. You just had to kind of talk about that to other users. Like, yeah, no, this could only be these 4 different transaction types. Now you can actually define that in code where you have like, your super transaction type, and then it says like, okay, only these 4 transaction types can extend off of it. And that can be very helpful, at least for enforcing that and communicating that behavior. But we'll also see a little bit later in Java 21 how we can actually extend and make that that feature a bit more useful and functional within our code. Yeah. Within this, no. I mean, it would have to have visibility to it, but yeah, as long as it has visibility, it doesn't matter where it's located. Sorry?
You design a system where you know you need an admin customer, yes.
Uh-huh.
You make those.
Uh-huh.
Now you got this other developer over here, he wants to extend, so he doesn't even add. And now he can, because it's under permit.
Well, but yeah, well, I mean, in this though, like you would be, importing this specific admin under this specific package. So that would be the only one. It couldn't just be any admin class. It would be the one, if I wasn't importing the class within the code here, it would be the fully qualified name to this admin. So yeah.
I could actually send that in a fully different jar, as long as I got the namespace correct. It would be like, yeah, I recognize that name.
So you're some sort of like namespacing, so where you're saying like bringing like a different jar and
I let third parties develop that.
yeah.
They got their own dev stack. I just need to know if the namespace is successful, as long as you.
Yeah, like you're saying like kind of like maliciously override it or something like that. Oh. Yeah. Then yeah, that would be right or something. I mean,
yeah, the gray area between malicious behavior and student development is the question.
Yeah.
But yeah, if this was outside of my single Maven project that I actually wanted to say that's a separate project for a separate team, I should be able to do that.
yeah.
Have to be the same binary. Here.
Yeah, I guess if you're getting outside the binary, that yeah, you can have an abstract class for it.
Then they can do whatever they want.
Yeah. One moment. Let me get my share. Exactly. So when you're defining the sealed hierarchy, I mean, you're saying like when you're writing user, you'd be saying only these classes can extend it. So if it's not already defined, like I have my own, yeah. So if someone else tried to extend it without having access to user, like they wouldn't be able to.
That's okay.
I don't think, I mean, yeah, I don't think you would ever, I don't even know that would work. I don't even think you would want to attempt to do that. Like that just wouldn't make. Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. Sealed hierarchy. I mean, the point is so there would be like two levels to this. There would be the level of the application developer, which I'm guessing was what most people are here for your organizations, like about defining certain domain concepts. There would also be the level of the framework developer, where it's like, oh, okay, like I'm working on the Spring project, and we have like some service class for security, and I want to only say like there's only 3 different implementations you can choose from, like MD5 if you're not knowing what you're doing, and 3 whatever. You would maybe set it up that way to where then no one else could create a different implementation of it. But yeah, I don't think, I mean, I guess you wouldn't want to cross compilation units trying to build a steel class. I don't even know if that would work. And if it would work, it would just be a horrible anti-pattern of endlessly trying to sync it up. That would just never make sense to attempt. So yeah, I wouldn't attempt to do that, even if I don't think it's possible. But you can cross package layers. You probably wouldn't want to, but you should be able to. Unsealed? Yeah, you don't have to clear it. So yeah, by default, yeah, all classes are non-sealed. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions then, or? All right. So we'll also see a little bit later how this can also be a bit more functional and useful. Next is records, and these were added in Java 16. Their JEP is 395. So records, at the first glance, and most obvious how developers were working with it. The benefit is they can define a data class within a single line, like I'm doing right here with a person class. But that wasn't the goal of records, to make it easier to define data classes. And when Brian Getz heard me suggesting that was the case, you would probably hunt me down and hurt me. Brian Getz is the chief language architect. The actual goal of Java, the actual goal of records is to have the transparent modeling of data as data. And this is the start of the kind of data-oriented programming approach within Java that's becoming a bigger story. I'll talk about that in a little bit later here. But the way records can kind of be this transparent modeling of data is because they have a lot of constraints on them. So first, a record, it's final, and its superclass will always be Java Lang record. So you have that confidence that it's not going to be bringing in some sort of behavior from some other superclass that you don't really know about. It's always going to be, its superclass is always going to be record. So also it can't be extended, abstract, or all implicitly final. All the fields within record are final, but they're only shallowly immutable. So if one of these fields, I made it like an array or a list or some sort of mutable object, you could still change values within that object. So like I could add an item or remove an item from a list. So if you're doing something like that, or if you're having some sort of field like that within a record, it'd be really important to be doing both defensive copies when you're bringing that list in. So like within the constructor, you wouldn't want to copy that list into like an unmodifiable copy within the record itself. And then you would also want to return like an unmodifiable copy out of that list as well. So that way some user of like a record that you wrote, they're trying to change like a value within that list or the collection or whatever the mutable object it is, they wouldn't be able to, because that way, then you would get potentially unexpected behavior. Like, wait a second, I added this item to this list and now it's not showing up in it. You just want to make sure to avoid that. Yes.
Can a record implement an interface?
Yes.
And can it be generic? Use generic.
Yeah. Yes. Also, you also can't declare instance fields. So in records, like all these fields up here, these are called components. But like if I here within like the actual body of the record, if I tried to add like another field like middle name within it, you can't do that. You have to declare it at the actual record declaration. Also, it will automatically generate hash code to string and equals. To go back to the point I was making about arrays or lists or collection types, if you are using one of those within your record, you would probably want to override hash code and equals. The default behavior of hash code and equals is to do a comparison on the reference ID for like of a list or an array. And that's probably not the behavior you would want. You would probably want to actually do a value comparison on the elements within that list or array or map or whatever it is. Because, if you have like two arrays and it has like all the same values within the array, you would say like those are equal, but it would by default come back as unequal because the references wouldn't be the same. But yeah, as mentioned, you can override those default implementations. Yes.
Equals where you can actually specify. So you have a record database.
Mm-hmm. You would just have to override it and do it yourself. Yeah. Any other questions then about records or? Okay. Next is pattern matching for instance of. Again, this is another thing that a lot more examples of pattern matching have been added, but the first one being added was pattern matching for instance of with Java 16 with JEP 394. Instance of, how many times have people like who has written an instance of within the last year? Yeah, it's not too often. Yeah, 2 people. That's about right. It's not necessarily a very common thing Java developers do. I mean, I think within my career, I've probably only actually written instance of like 3 or 4 times or something like that, or maybe a dozen or something, but not often. All the same though, whenever you've done instance of, you had that very annoying pattern where ignore this for right now, but you would have okay, this some number type, it's an instance of integer, but then within the if you'd be like, okay, some number type casting it to integer, be like, okay, wait, why am I doing that? Like, I already know it's an integer. Why do I have to do the whole casting again? So this gets rid of that annoying behavior. So with patterns, you have the predicate. In this case, the test of if some number types an instance of, and if that's true, then it would set the pattern variable, in this case, I, maybe I shouldn't have the cursor over it. It would set the pattern variable to that I, of whatever that match is. And then is what's called flow scope. So that means it's in scope wherever the compiler knows that predicate is definitely true. So how you should be writing it is kind of like what I have here, your standard, if statement that's checking for true, and then, working with I here. Technically, what you could do is if I was to write this as like a not at the start of it, and then throw an exception or something like that, then I would be available throughout the rest of like the scope of that area. You wouldn't want to do that because that would be a maintenance nightmare. But that's just to say that it's not like hard coded that I is only available in the following if block, but it's following a logical pattern. So I touched a little bit on data-oriented programming. So back in the late spring and summer, one of my colleagues on the Java DevRel team at Oracle, Nikolai Parlog, maybe you've heard of him, he put together, I think it was a 7-part series kind of covering data-oriented programming. So a few years back, Brian Getz, again, that's a chief language architect for Java, he kind of wrote like a bit of a white paper on data-oriented programming within Java. And Nikolai here, that was about like 2 or 3 years ago, he kind of wrote like a bit of an update on maybe kind of working with these concepts as well. But overall, it's just kind of walking you through what the purpose is, what the goals are of using data-oriented programming, giving some practical examples. A big thing is that you don't have to like, okay, I'm starting to write a program. You don't have to make a decision. Am I going to write it data-oriented programming, or I'm going to write it object-oriented programming? They can both kind of work together. The major advantage of data-oriented programming is that, 15-ish plus years ago, most of the time when you're writing a Java program, it was written very much as like a monolithic application. So you weren't often interacting at data barriers as quite as often. But kind of, in the years since then, kind of starting in the 2010s and on, you got like service-oriented architectures, microservices architectures, and you're more often interacting at those data layers, talking to a database or talking to some sort of other web service. And so you're having to do like a lot of data translation. Data-oriented programming kind of works a little bit better with that area, because I know some of the applications I had to work on that were more monolithic, but whenever I had to kind of talk at a data boundary, doing that data translation to like XML or JSON was often very painful. So that it makes it a little bit easier in those areas. Yes.
I guess just kind of a reaction. When I saw these things coming along in Java, it almost looked to me like Java is attempting to retrofit algebraic data types like you would find in a functional language, where records would represent a conjunction, and the sealed classes would represent disjunction. In other words, and versus or for that data type. It's just that it's a lot more verbose. Because it isn't, it's just the history of the language. We have to stay consistent. That was part of the goals there as well. And then that should enable you to do pattern matching in your switch statements, which I'll probably get to. Yes, I'll get to that also in just a few moments. So one other thing is I covered here like the big changes, but there's also a lot of small like API changes and updates. And so if you go the link there, one of the really nice things the JavaDoc team has been doing is like they added this new API since specific version. And then so as many people are already on Java 17 here, maybe you're looking to make that update to Java 21.
So, you can then just select, okay, we're updating to Java 21. What's all the new API classes and features that have been added between 17 and 21? So this is a really nice way to narrow this down. You can also do the same thing for looking for deprecated as well. And all those features and stuff, like this isn't strictly relegated to the JDK. So if you're working on some sort of library at your work or something, you can actually implement these features. Like you have like new sense or deprecated sense. Like that's how this kind of works within it, to where, whatever versioning that you're using, it can also work with this as well. So definitely there's a lot of really cool features that have been added to JavaDoc over recent releases. So if, again, you're supporting some sort of library or framework, definitely take a look at JavaDoc or some of these new features. It can help with the documentation of your application or whatever you're working on. All right. Oh yeah, and also always make sure to check out our release notes. Again, a lot of useful information within them, covering really any change of substance. All right, so let's start getting into the post Java 17 features. So as Bruce was mentioning, pattern matching has become a much bigger subject within Java since 17. And pattern matching for Switch is probably one of the biggest changes. So when you are using pattern matching within a switch, it must be exhaustive. So even if you're writing it as a statement, it would still have to, all the code paths would have to be covered. One also nice additional feature is you can also handle null directly within the switch. So here I have a simple interface shape, and then I have 3 classes, triangle, circle, and square, that are implementing it. And then here within the switch, I am doing pattern matching. So if it's if it's a triangle, shape is a triangle type, then it will set it to T. And then this here is called a guard clause. And so it's like, okay, whenever T, I will then inspect its area. If it's greater than 100, then I will do, that's like a large triangle, and I'll do something special with it. If it's less than 100, then it will match down here, and it will do something else. Needless to say, so the case before, like it goes from top to bottom. This can't, like if I tried to switch this around to where triangle T was on top, and then if I switch these 2 cases, that would give me a compiler error, because this case would fully dominate this case. So you have to write it that way, from top to bottom, from least dominant to most dominant. But yeah, even though I'm writing this, I keep forgetting, I need to update this example to where I'm just like doing a print line or whatever. But this is being written as a statement. And even though it's being written as a statement, I would still need to include a default case, because it must be exhaustive. I can also handle null directly within the switch as well. So though, if, for example, in this example, shape could be null for some reason, instead of having to surround this switch with a if to say if checking for null, I can handle it directly in here, which again makes it a little bit more cleaner, a little bit more concise. As you know, I obviously don't have like a null in here. Like the compiler already knows how to handle null, just to throw at MPE if it hits on it. So you would never, null checking isn't part of the exhaustiveness of it. And then the last thing here is to your point of having a sealed interface. So here I've sealed interface as shape, and then again I'm having the triangle, circle, and square implemented. And now because I have triangle, circle, and square all covered within this switch, I don't actually need to include a default, because it's all the different code paths are being covered, so it's exhaustive. So this is where you're starting to see a more functional usage out of the sealed hierarchy. But then what's really nice is that, okay, let's say we added pentagon or something in here for the different shape types, then this would give a compiler error. And that's really nice, just because, even if you have a very mature and well-designed automated test suite, it's very difficult to always cover new code paths. And so if you had some junior developer who went in and added the new pentagon shape type without, maybe adding the test case for it, you could get a bug in production. But because you haven't written like this, you can even compile and deploy it, because the compiler would say that's not being checked on. So it's a way of improving the safety of your code as well. Yes.
You missed the when clause, when t.area is bigger than 100.
So that's a guard clause. So yeah, so this is a way of you being able to farther check on that matching of it without having, like, because before, without this, you would maybe have to include like an if statement within the match or the body of the case. Now you can actually include that in the label of the case.
And can you do what is it called? It's an assignment that destructures your triangle, circle, or square. So if it's a triangle, suppose it's equal on sides, what's the side over there? If it's a square, or if it's a circle, what's the radius?
Are you talking like record pattern matching, or
Yeah,
I'll get to that.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll get to that. Don't spoil the surprises, Bruce. So then we also have, record patterns also added in Java 21 with JEP 440. And so record patterns, simply what they are is a deconstructor for a pattern. So of course, we're all very familiar with the constructor of new, and then you pass in all the values or matching for that constructor. Deconstructor just works in the opposite way of, here I have my 3 components, first name, middle name, last name. And here I'm like, okay, if I match on instance of like a name, then I can just pull out all of the different components from that record. So I was very deliberate in not having the same names between this. So the way record or pattern matching works for records, it's based upon, is the variable name that you have assigned here compatible with the type at that position for that record. Here I'm simply using var for ease, because then that will always then match on that type. But if I was to put like integer here instead, then that will give a compiler error because that wouldn't be a compatible type matching with that record. So it would need to be either var or string, or if you wanted to be really weird, you could put object, which obviously you shouldn't do, but that's how that would work. You can also combine record patterns with switch. So kind of to what you're getting to, of like if the shape types of those are actually records, I could explode this out here to where I can do first name, middle name, last name. And then I'm saying like, okay, if middle name isn't empty, then, I will print out, last name followed by first name and middle name. If middle name is empty, then I'll just do like first name and then last name, or last name and then first name, without, obviously trying to print out the middle name. Yes.
Records, they're kind of semantic sugar, like apples and rust.
Yeah, they're tuples. Yeah.
They're not actually producing any garbage. They're actually a concept. These things go together.
Mm-hmm.
And the compiler is taking care of those rules for me.
Yep. Yep.
But it doesn't actually exist as something in the heap in any way.
Yeah.
Individual items do, but the record itself is really more of a, like I said, semantic sugar.
No, it exists in the heap. Record is a real class and everything. Like it's a class that just has specific constraints on it. But so it would be on the heap like any other normal class would be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just syntactic sugar or anything like that. It's
Why would they use a class?
well, because you get certain benefits. Like, so right now we don't have like the deconstructor record pattern matching for normal classes. So like that's a benefit you get from it. Or also kind of like to go back to records is that, if you just have a data class or something, you can define it within a single, line. No, I mean, you can still put a body in here. So like, if I wanted to override hash code or equals, or if I wanted to do something a little bit different with a constructor, or if I wanted to do something a little bit different with an accessor, you can still write this out as a full class or something. But, if you just have like a simple data class, you can.
I can't add any members.
You can't add any instance fields, but you could add additional methods if you wanted to for some reason.
So it's the same as you need a stand function.
Yeah.
Or even interface, I can add methods as long as I'm only accessing things that are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. let's see. So then one thing that was also added in Java 22 now is unnamed patterns and variables. So like, let's say I have like a bit more of a complex, like I'm here using multiple records. So like the same name class, like using previously an address class with, you know, address like fields of like address line 1, 2, city, state, and all that information. And then I kind of combined it all up into like a billing address. It also includes like a credit card number and a date for expiration. And then like also a customer, which has like a name, address, and then a billing reference. So let's just say then I want to do something with billing address. Like right here, I'm just saying like, okay, if it's an instance of customer, I'll explode it out with record pattern matching. But really all I care about is billing address, because for whatever reason, for whatever business I need to do, I just need to work with billing address. You know, it's a bit confusing because now I'm having to declare all of these different variables, even though I'm not planning on using any of them. So what unnamed patterns allow you to do is replace those with underscores. So that makes it more clear to later developers. It's like, no, all I'm working with right here is billing address. Now, there's no operational benefit to this. Like this is just being assigned some like random variable name within like the JVMs. Like if you were to debug this, like you would still be able to see, you know, like again, to have like a randomly generated ID for these variables. So you're not like saving on memory by doing this, but it would just be for, I guess, syntactic sugar to make it more clear, like I'm only working with billing address in this location. Also, alternatively, let's say I just wanted to do something with the name for customer name. You know, I wouldn't have to then explode out like the billing and address and all that stuff as well. So it's just a way of making things more concise, making it clear I'm only working with like these specific variables. Yes.
What happens though when you have a null value in it, when you have like a customer and you've destructured it, so you're trying to get the customers?
Well,
the address and maybe, but the address was null in that instance that got passed down. I think it was more on the other screen that you had.
Okay.
How is it handling the null? Yeah, so you give it a customer, but notice that one of the fields in it is an address.
Yeah.
If that address is null, how is it handling to pull out the billing address out of that if that's a null reference in the?
Well, then that would probably just give a null pointer exception.
It's just going to give you a null pointer.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that would be an NP. I haven't specifically tested that, but yeah, that's about the only way I can imagine it would happen, is that you're trying to expand out a null point. Yeah. That or just wouldn't match on it because it couldn't match on null, but I'm pretty sure that would be an MPE in that. Well, you can't. Or so like, let's say if customer here is null, then it wouldn't match because obviously that wouldn't be an instance of customer. But if you're exploding it out. Yeah.
Address or versus matching on a billing address that exists.
Yeah.
Put that ahead in like a switch statement. You want to handle the null case first or something.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that'll probably just be like an MPE to kind of like to your original thing that would happen. Yeah, you had a question then?
It looks like an entity, like an hibernate. One of the records taking hibernate annotations, so in that one, or is there a way to take your entities?
They wouldn't be a good match because records are immutable. So, because like the entity types within hibernate and stuff like that, they're expecting those fields to be mutable. So like I remember when records first came out, I was playing with that, and like they just didn't work together because it's immutable and they're expecting entity to be mutable.
Proper use case would be controlling record data, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing here is you're doing the whole entire chain of tables, the functional constraints of it.
Yeah.
So if I'm pulling data from the database and I've got 10 tables, I'm all mapped out.
Mhm.
And I pull that, say, from hibernate, is there an easy way to map that to a record then, and something that you're doing here, or is you have to write it?
I think you would have to write it yourself. Like, it wouldn't work well with those annotations because, again, like the entity type within like Hibernate, it's expecting it to be a mutable class to where if you update like like a field within it, then it would update it and then it would write it down to the database. And again, records are immutable, so like they just don't match that well. Now one of the goals is to add withers to constructors to where, you can update, like take this, record and then re-update it with this one field and return me back like a new one from it. Maybe Hibernate, some library can maybe update it to kind of work with that syntax whenever we finally make that available, which I don't know when that's coming right now. It's kind of getting pushed out. But that could be eventually. But like, yeah, right now, like they just don't match. Like you can use it when working it as like a view to where you're only pointed in, but you're never going to go back and update it. But that's it. And so like, that's not quite getting like most of the use people want out of it. They're ideally for whenever you're working with data. So, I mean, it could be working with databases and connecting to JDBC, but I mean, there's so many other cases where you're. Sorry, what was that?
You know, another ORM third-party solution that would give us records of data. I'm sure people are working on this.
I don't know. I haven't really followed up on checking on that kind of since after records were initially done, because like I tried working with that with like JPA as well, or I guess Hibernate implementation JPA. But yeah, I tried working on it a little bit then, and none of them were compatible. And I don't think any of them have done that, but I really haven't checked into the last year or two for that. Yeah.
I'm taking to answer that question. You might want to take a look at Juke, J-O-O-Q.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you've come across it.
Yeah.
It takes a different approach than Hibernate or the other ORMs in that it's called a DSL, a domain-specific language, and you're writing SQL, but you're really not Java. And what'll happen is I think Juke will give you a mapping, so it'll hand you like a generic record or something, and then you could use that little factory to create your immutable records off of that.
Yeah.
So you will have to write a little bit for that initial mapping, but it should be okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't really, like I said, I checked a bit with like Hibernate and or some of like the Spring Data stuff as well, kind of again shortly after records were released, but I haven't really followed up on how it interacts with ORM since then to see if like any of them have tried to do that. Like I said, I think whenever we do withers for our, so let's see, what was that? Yeah, derived record creation. So this is what I was talking about. So this is implementing what's called withers with records, as it kind of shows here. Maybe when they add that, that could be a way where with some finagling that could work with like an ORM, but until then, probably not.
But I would look at Juke. I'm a real fan of that one.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of approaching the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I like about that is that you kind of check the syntax of your select.
Yeah.
Whereas with Hibernate, it's going to create it for you. And you just leave it to the tool to do it, but who knows what it's actually going to create.
Yeah. What was that?
JPA, Spring Data, data.
Yeah, Spring Data JPA.
Basically, not SQL, but it's JPL, whatever, Java, query language. I did a talk about it a long time ago, so. Here. But I like record, but it seems to me like if you use an ORM, like I ran or something, it's probably a better use case.
Yeah, in that case, it probably is. But like, let's say you're working with like some sort of web service where you're communicating over JSON, just creating like a record to represent like that transaction object or that communication message, then writing it out. Huh? Yeah, or just some other external web service, you know, like you're working with some sort of third-party API where you're sending JSON messages or whatever, XML if you're still wanting to do that. But, you know, writing out like that message, whatever that message shape is, as records are probably a lot easier and quicker than having to write it all out as classes, normal classes.
Well, that raises kind of another interesting aspect to this, because I don't know how well something like, is it Jackson?
Jackson works with it, yeah.
Jackson will work with the
Yep.
immutable records.
They were actually fantastic from the very get-go on supporting it. Some of the other ones don't work it well. I don't know where they are now. I'm sure they probably should hopefully all support it, but like Jackson, before we even released records as a final feature or as a final feature, it already had full support. I wrote like an article about it way back when, at the time, kind of comparing some of the popular ones. I mean, Jackson has become so ubiquitous that like I don't even know, because like the only other one was like whatever Google's was one, which was it No, that wasn't whatever. JSON, yeah, that used to be somewhat popular, but then they, you know, hashtag killed by Google, so like it's no longer really that supported. I don't think it's used that widely anymore. So yeah.
In more than one company's online coding assessments, codes this year.
Really? Yeah. So, well, I guess it's somewhat being used, but I think Jackson's become so ubiquitous because it has great support. So, continuing on a little bit with unnamed patterns, though. So it's not just only working with like record patterns. You can use it in other areas. This is a bit of a contrived example, but like let's say I'm doing like a enhanced for loop over name here, and I'm never referencing the n variable, then I could just replace that with an underscore as well. Again, that's a pretty contrived example, but you know, maybe there could be some occasional example where that could be useful. Maybe a little bit more practical example though is like a lot of times a legal argument exception, when you get it, that's because of like some sort of bad client input. And typically that was a happen. You maybe don't really care about that stack trace. You're maybe just going to be sending back an error message back to the client or whoever that you know, saying like, hey, you know, cat's not a valid age. You goof. But all the same, in that case, you can just replace the you know, E variable here with the underscore just to make it clear, like, hey, yeah, it was an intentional decision just to eat this exception because we don't really care about the exception stack trace in this, you know, instance. Not to say, you know, you should be doing this as a general practice, but, you know, occasionally something like this, you know, maybe that would make sense.
So I guess underscore is now a keyword, where it didn't always used to be.
Yeah, it didn't used to be. So I think it's just underscore alone. But sorry, actually I think it was in JDK 9 is when it became a reserved character.
Okay.
And then now with JDK 22 is when we
We're
actually,
obviously using it.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's a case where code might not compile.
Yeah, I think though,
People are gonna name their variables underscore.
yeah, and I don't think there's anyone that ever did just underscore alone. Like, I don't know. Yeah, if you did like underscore, like, or if you had underscore included within like a longer variable name, if that's still valid, I can't remember offhand. So, but all the same, yeah, that underscore became reserved. I believe it was in JDK 9. So everyone here, you know, if you would have already ran into this exception or this compiler error before, yeah. API updates. So this is really nice quality of life enhancement was sequence collections added in JDK 21. So this promoted a bunch of methods from, in this case, DQ. So like we have like add first, add last, as its name suggests, adding at the either start or the end of a collection, getting first, getting last, remove first, remove last. Again, just quality of life enhancements. Probably the biggest benefit though is reversed. Just because going through a collection backwards was definitely a bit of a pain before. And so now you can just simply call the reverse method and you can go backwards reversed. This returns a view into the underlying collection. And then if you make an update to that view, that would then be copied into the underlying collection as well. And then we made the corresponding updates as well to maps. as well. So, reverse, sequence key set, all that stuff, put first, put last, and so on. It's worth noting, though, how the hierarchy of this was added. So, like, again, when you're using a list, pretty much everyone just uses an array list. Or if you're using like a set, a lot of times people are using like a sorted set or something. So you would get the benefit of the sequence collection. But where this is notable is on the map side, because again, a lot of times the implementation a lot of Java developers are using with map is hash map. Like how many times you use hash map when you're, or most people, I'm guessing. But as you note, hash map extends off a map. So it wouldn't get the benefit from the sequence map, which of course also makes sense because it's a hash, so it doesn't have a consistent order. So if you did want to get the benefit of the new sequence map API, then you would have to use, a map that, extends or implements off a sorted map, navigable map, or linked hash map. Any questions on the new sequence collects? All right. Okay, so definitely the biggest change that was added with JDK 21 was virtual threads. This is the central feature of Project Loom, a project that was followed with quite a bit of excitement and anticipation for a number of years. And so to kind of get into this and describe what's going on, so all the code you write in Java runs on threads. So whether it's Hello World or the more, actual enterprise applications or whatever you guys are working on at your job, all of it runs on a thread. So historically, threads have pretty much mapped one-to-one with the underlying operating system thread. And a thread is pretty expensive to create. I think it's about like a megabyte on heap space. It takes a few milliseconds or a couple milliseconds, something like that, to spin up, and also has some teardown. There's some other mechanics around it as well. And kind of what this means is like there's relatively limited number of threads you can be running concurrently on a JVM before you start to maybe run into some thrashing issues. So like, here, this box obviously kind of represents your JVM at an overall view. Now, if you're doing some sort of CPU heavy work, this isn't really an issue. If like you're fully maxing out CPU utilization, then adding another thread isn't really going to get you much benefit. But how many people here kind of work on some sort of web application as like their primary role of work? Most, or a good amount of people. Okay, actually, a lot of people are working, I guess, something different. But in a web application world, which is kind of my background before I became a developer advocate, a lot of times you would get a request in, and then that request would be attached to a specific thread. And then as that processes through, it calls out to the database or whatever to like look up that user's information. And so whatever amount of time it takes to make that call and get that return, that thread is just sleeping, waiting for that response. Then, you maybe do a little bit of work, and then you call out to some other web service, to do whatever you need to do. And then once again, while that is happening and waiting for response, that thread is sleeping. Now, if we expand this out to the overall JVM level, is you could be kind of hitting your limit on the number of threads that JVM or that system can handle. But if you were to actually look at what those threads are doing, a lot of times they could be sleeping. So if like you do like a profiling of like your standard web application, oftentimes, maybe that thread utilization, memory, and all that could be pretty high, but the CPU utilization could be really low because, again, a lot of those threads are just spending time sleeping, waiting for some sort of response back. So, virtual threads in Project Loom. The goal of them was to split the concept of thread into two parts. The platform thread, which is basically the existing concept of a thread, maps more or less one-to-one to the underlying operating system thread, and then a virtual thread, which exists only in memory and then runs on top of a platform thread. And so the benefit here is these virtual threads will be put into a queue, and then that queue, the JDK will then take virtual threads from that queue and put them on a platform thread that is available to be run. And then as those virtual threads, if they run into some sort of blocking operation, then the JDK will then put that thread back into the queue if there's other virtual threads that are ready to be run. and then put virtual threads that need to be run on those of now available platform threads. And so the JDK then would listen for the socket to where information is coming back. And once it starts receiving data back from it, that means it's eligible to be re-queued again. And so now you get a much better utilization of your system resources. But the benefit then is that, so like here, this virtual thread started up on this platform thread, but then on this platform thread, all the stack and all the information with that virtual thread stays with it, even as it crosses the different virtual threads. So from a debugging and operational perspective and how you write these programs, you wouldn't have to change how you write it, and you wouldn't really change too much in debugging it. So it makes it, you get like a lot of the benefits of reactive programming without having all the drawbacks that come from reactive programming. Yes. So as of right now, yeah, so have you used completable futures? Oh, well, if anyone's used computable futures, it uses the same pool, the work stealing fork join pool for the underlying queuing. But yeah, it's a simple FIFO overall, that the overall algorithm, how it works. Right now, we are looking into allowing at the top of the queue within whatever order, that it would be. That means it's eligible to be reattached to a platform thread once it starts receiving data back. But yeah, so right now there's only a single implementation, a FIFO implementation. We are looking at potentially expanding that out to where you get to write your other implementations. But it's also like writing this stuff out is involving a lot of low-level JVM and JDK code. So, we're trying to figure out how to best do that, because it can be very easy to write it incorrectly. And really, it's probably not something that you would be doing as an application developer. It would be something like, okay, because I think like the team that kind of first really wanted this was like the Quarkus team, was like asking our JDK team about doing this. So like, you'd be more about like working with whatever framework. It'd be like, oh, I'm going to use this different strategy. Yeah, absolutely.
And this is more like a request, I guess. Is there a way to affinitize the virtual threads to carrier threads?
Yeah, so I think you can do pinning to specific platform threads if you want to. I think generally once you start getting into that, you'd be a case of like, do you really want to use a virtual thread if you're doing some sort of CPU heavy work? In which case you wouldn't really start to see much benefit from a virtual thread. And there could even be a little bit of drawback, because obviously there can be a little bit of drawback from, the constantly like maybe removing a virtual thread from the queue and reattaching and detaching. There's like, there's going to be a little bit of overhead within that. And I guess also sometimes if you have like a lot of platform threads, but not many virtual threads, there can be a little bit sometimes issues of thrashing, where it's like constantly like trying to do, like putting virtual threads on platform threads and taking them off. But for the most part, it works good. There has been like a few issues that have been found. If you've been following this, like a few months ago, Netflix kind of wrote like a blog article where they ran into some issues that kind of had to do with like synchronized with reentrant locks. And there's also been like an issue when it comes to pinning and synchronized. And I think in JDK 24, we're including fixes to kind of address those issues. But yeah, I've kind of worked with some people who have been trying to use virtual threads, and it's been very helpful. Again, if you're doing like a lot of blocking stuff in your code, considering switching to virtual threads can be very helpful. And we'll see a little bit later. It's going to be a little bit before it becomes a final feature, but there's some other features coming with Loom that will also really help when it comes to writing concurrent code. For example, like the job that Jeff was talking about before my presentation. Writing concurrent code is not the best within Java, and we'll see soon maybe how it could get a lot better in the not too distant future. Any other questions though about virtual threads? Okay, I'll get to you later. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be more performant if you had a very high throughput context switch would probably tax it a little bit if you were going to do that. If you're looking for a count having more second.
Yeah. So, I mean, there could always be, so like if you were to have a really well-designed, well-written reactive application, like, or something like that, that could probably work better to where you're really handling, like, to make sure like the absolute, like, you know, where maybe every millisecond or every microsecond counts, that would maybe probably perform better. But for many applications, you know, like if you're writing your standard Spring Boot application or something, you probably see a lot more benefit from just, you know, if you're on JDK 21 a layer and using like Spring Boot 3.3 or whatever it is, just to pass in like the application property to use virtual threads. And then the underlying Tomcat would switch to, or Tomcat or whatever you're using, to using virtual threads to put attached for every request. So yeah, like I said, there will still be cases where, you know, reactive programming or whatever it might be, you know, could still give you better performance, but oftentimes to get to that level, you have to, you know, take on pretty substantial changes to how your application's built and written. And, you know, for the vast majority of cases, that benefit wouldn't necessarily be worth it. Whereas, you know, and then, yeah. Yeah.
If you needed to pass messages between your like a platform thread, right? Or you're trying to coordinate.
Mhm.
Like, are there special constructs for that, or we can still use like, you know, like common classes? Is that like really getting outside of space for virtual threads, or if you included a pass messages, basically you feel like you could take two threads, you would just.
So depending on it, like there's, so like right now, as far as what our final features are concerned, like you maybe be using some sort of atomic or something to what you're saying. Now, eventually you might be using something called a scope value, which I'll be getting to here in a few moments, or also using things like structured concurrency if you're trying to coordinate between threads, which I'll also get to here in a few moments when I get into the beyond section of this presentation. But yeah, no, great question. Any other questions then about virtual threads? I know this is like probably like one of the biggest features. So
We had Venkat come in and do an entire talk.
yeah, I'm sure he explained it. He explains it much better than I do because he's Venkat. Okay. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them later. The last of these new, or not quite last. So then we also added the foreign function and memory API. How many people have worked with the Java native interface? No one? Okay, I'm going to just quickly go through this. This is an update to the Java native interface. Like as I mentioned, I was a web application developer before, so I never really worked with the Java native interface. So the problem with the Java native interface is like there's inconsistencies in the API design. Also, there's some issues when it comes to security, and then also when working with memory. Their foreign function memory API is just seeking to kind of make that more consistent, avoid some of those potential landmines and pitfalls that also are present in the JNI. JNI, there's no plans to remove it. I know there's plans to kind of restrict its usage some, but it's not going to be going away anytime soon or at all. There's no plans on sunsetting it. There's also the JExtract tool. So like this can read on the screen, the native library headers to create like a mechanical API for then working with that native library. Something I still kind of need to work with. I know some of my team members, like they're looking at creating something that, you know, reads the native library for like your keyboard, and then like, you know, rewriting something to where, you know, you're remapping the keyboard or something like that. You know, a good way to kind of give like some practical experience with working with Java, the foreign function memory API. Also Markdown and Javadoc. So yeah, this is just about making Javadoc potentially easier to read when looking at it in the IDE. So the syntax the markdown language or the markup language for JavaDoc has HTML. Obviously, HTML can be very verbose. So if you're trying to read some sort of, JavaDoc that's using a lot of HTML in it, it's very difficult to actually read that natively within your IDE. A lot of times like Eclipse and IntelliJ, you can like hover over the method name or whatever, and then it'll give you the pop-up for it, but it'd be kind of nice if you could just read it just directly. And so that's where Markdown could be helpful because its syntax is a lot easier, more human readable. And so anyways, that's denoted by using the triple / for that line within the JavaDoc. So runtime features and tools. Who here's heard of CDS? Wish we talked about that. One person, yes. The history behind CDS, it goes all the way back to JDK 5, but what it does is that whenever your JVM starts up, it loads a bunch of classes from the file system. Now, back in the days when you actually had magnetic platters where it had to spin up and had to read from it, that file I/O was pretty expensive. It's not too expensive now that, most of the time we're using solid state drives. But I was saying there's still some benefit. So what CDS does, it creates a pre-processed archive of like all the classes you're loading at startup, and then it can just load that from memory to make that a lot quicker. So some of the changes we've made in subsequent releases, so initially that was only for JDK classes, but we've expanded it to where it can also be your application classes as well. And we've made it so easy to where you can just provide a single JVM argument for either creating that archive if it's not there, or just loading that archive if it is there. So that creates a lot more consistency. So between building your application and then running in production, to where it's just it can be the same Java command, whereas before it would have to be slightly different for building versus reading from that archive. If you do care about startup time, there's a project called Project Loom that is working on improving startup time and time to peak performance for Java, and it's using CDS. Like CDS is the base of that project as well. So very interesting, underappreciated feature for sure. There's a simple web server. So that is just a simple way of serving up files from your file system. The primary motivation behind this was for education purposes. Like oftentimes when people were first learning programming language, or students are learning programming, oftentimes there would be a step where you have to be serving up files on your system or whatever. And to do that, you would typically need, or before you would need to go out and get like Tomcat or Node or something to do that. Now we just provide a built-in way within the JDK to handle that. Don't use this in production. There's no security around it. So, don't use it in production. What, sorry? Sorry? Very, very, very simplified Jetty. It's a very, very basic, just for serving up files. It can also be useful for like a testing purpose where you're saying, you want to maybe just have it set up to return some sort of JSON or whatever you want to have it to do, to test certain like interactions as well. So that can be also useful, not just for students. Generational ZGC. So back in JDK 15 or 16, ZGC was released as a new garbage collector. Back then, it was released as a single generation garbage collector. So for everyone who raised their hand about being on JDK 17, which is most people here, you would only have access to the single generation garbage collector version of ZGC. But with JDK 21, we released a generational one. And the long and short of it, without getting too deep into garbage collectors, is that it's just more memory and CPU efficient than a single generational garbage collector. So if you're on JDK 21 to use it, you would need to include the plus Z generational. Though as of JDK 23, the generational option is now the default, and the single generation garbage collector is going to be removed. Just to make sure it's clear, though, the G1 garbage collector still remains to be the default garbage collector on the JVM. So if you don't specify ZDC, you're still using this a G1 garbage collector. But anyways, sorry about the ZGC. the major benefits for it is that it has extremely low pause time. So it's sub millisecond. And in practice, it's usually between 500 and 250 microseconds for pause time. So if you're writing a web application and latency is a major concern, the Z garbage collector would be a very good option. It's also highly scalable. It can handle up to a 16 terabyte heap. The cost to that, though, is that it does use more CPU resources. So I was talking with some engineers who are been kind of comparing between G1 and ZGC for the uses, and they're finding about it's like a 10 to 15% CPU tax using ZGC over G1. So, you know, if it's not worth it to you to reduce the pause time, though, it's definitely worth checking out. Region Penny for G1. This again kind of gets back to the JNI, Java Native interface. So, you know, if that's important to you, definitely check this out. Otherwise, I'll kind of continue on because we're kind of, a bit over time. Launching multi-file source code applications. So this is back in JDK 11, we allowed it to where if you had a single file source code application, you can, instead of having to do Java C and then Java to execute it, you can just use a Java command to compile and then execute that program. Now we can do it with a multi-file source code applications where it would just follow the package structure to then build and execute those files. So very helpful, good for students, but also good if you're maybe writing some sort of simple scripting application. Deprecations and removals. Sorry for 32-bit Windows users. Your time has come. JDK 21 is going to be the last of your releases that you're going to be able to use. And then further restrictions to Sun Misk Unsafe. Okay, getting into the beyond. Structured concurrency. So as I was kind of referencing a little bit earlier, working and writing concurrent code right now in Java isn't exactly a great experience. The debugging aspects of it isn't so great. And there's also some things like, okay, so like, let's say you have like 3 or 4 tasks you wanted to execute. Like what happens if one of those tasks fails? Should the other task be canceled? Or should they continue on? What if one of them succeeds? Should the other task continue on? Or should they be canceled? So structured concurrency, as its name suggests, is providing more structured concurrency. So you would have like a structured task scope. And then within that, you would fork off different tasks. And then these task scopes, they would have different policies on how those tasks should be executed. So in this case, you have a shutdown on failure. So if any of those tasks was to fail, then it would tell all the other tasks to cancel and stop executing. Otherwise, it will wait until like there's a join point until all of them have succeeded. And then you can then do whatever you need to do with the results of those tasks. Like another one would be shut down on success, where, you know, if one of those tasks succeeded, then it just sends a cancel to all the other remaining concurrent tasks, and then you handle whatever that work is. So here I'm using the syntax that's available in JDK 23 and also would be available in JDK 24. But there is a big update to this API that is coming. It was hopefully going to be in 24, but I just found out today it's going to be pushed until JDK 25. But yeah, it's very nice. I've worked with it a lot. I have like a longer presentation just on this called Illuminated Java. So if you're interested, I'll be more than happy to give it. Or if you actually, you know, follow the link, if you just, so like the link that Bruce will send out, if you just go down to presentations, that will take you to here. And then I have a couple of GitHub projects on this that kind of go through how to use structured concurrency. So you can check that out. It's very useful. I think it's going to, it will make writing concurrent code a lot easier when it eventually comes. To your question earlier about communicating between virtual threads, for that, you would probably use a scoped value. So that's like an immutable value that can be worked with between multiple virtual threads. Now, depending upon your use case, like it's really meant to be worked or used within the context of structured concurrency. That is a whole longer discussion. I don't necessarily quite have time to get into. We're a little bit already going over time here. But that's probably something you would probably want to look into. So hopefully that will be finalized here in JDK 25, but they might wait until structured concurrency is finalized to finalize it itself. So Vector API, updates for computing vectors. It's going to remain in incubator status pending the release or until Project Valhalla features are going to start getting into preview status themselves, just because Project Valhalla, it's going to impact the underlying API implementation for vectors so much. There's just no point in promoting it until it's ready. Class file API. This is something, again, primarily that's going to be for framework developers, but the benefit for it is you're not necessarily going to have to always be upgrading your underlying libraries every time you upgrade your JDK. It's very useful for like libraries like ByteBuddy or something like that that does a lot of code generation. ByteBuddy, man, I can't remember, but it does how like Spring, like you put like some annotations and then it generates a bunch of classes when you start it up in runtime. You use ByteBuddy for that. And the difficulty for that is like whenever there's like a new version of the JDK release, that obviously changes up the class file API a bit. So that means you always have to have like to upgrade to a new version of the JDK and you're using things like Spring, you would also have to update that ByteBuddy version to be compatible with it, even if the underlying class file API hasn't changed. And so what this new class file API is doing is that as long as you're not depending upon some sort of new feature that has come with like a newer version, then you don't necessarily need to update that library version. So stream gatherers, all this is doing is, so at the end, as a terminal operation for streams, you have like the collect operation, where you can just do kind of have a lot of flexibility on what to do with the final transformation of that stream. Now this is just collect, but as an intermediate operation. So that just gives you like many to one, one to many, many to many, whatever you kind of need to do. It gives you a lot of flexibility on how to modify that. Flexible constructor bodies. This allows you to put statements and now also assignment of variables before the call to super within a constructor body. Here in this simple example with positive big integer, before, like you would have to make a call to super, but then maybe check the value to make sure it's actually positive, which, as the comment says, potentially unnecessary work. Long story short is you could just put like an if statement and say like, okay, making sure some sort of checking is happening beforehand, and making the code a bit more clean and easier to read. Primitive type patterns. As the name suggests, is allowing primitives within your patterns, type patterns, or pattern matching. So yeah, before, if I wanted to do integer, I would have to use big I integer, the reference type, but now I can just use a primitive type. And let's see, I think this is it. Yeah. And then finally is the implicitly declare classes and instance main methods. Again, this is getting back to our primarily education initiatives. So we've all written hello world one time, or in my case, many, many times. But yeah, people like to knock Java, again, for the verbosity of our simple hello world program, which is much more complex than things like Python or JavaScript and stuff like that. So the goal is to make it potentially as simple as void main print line. This might be changing a little bit, but the goal here is to make it a little bit more approachable. But then we also made it to where it's set up to where, as you want to introduce things like classes and accessing type with like public and all that stuff, you can slowly add those new concepts and build them up. Just so that way, when you're learning Java, you can learn these concepts one at a time, and you wouldn't necessarily have a professor be like, hey, don't worry about this public and class and static. We'll get to it later. Now you can introduce these things one at a time. But it's called Paving the On-Ramp. And again, Brian Getz, he wrote a whole thing that kind of is laying out that vision. And also, if you're not really like, hey, I'm, everyone here is, or a professional Java developer. So learning Java isn't really a thing anymore, but even this stuff is kind of nice if you're writing some sort of simple, like I've forgotten like all my bash scripting since my college days. So it's actually kind of nice that I can write out like a really simple Java program with some of this stuff as well. If you need to do something like simply parsing, some like text file, whatever, you can kind of just hack that out in Java now instead of having to use shell. All right. Since a lot of people here are on Java 17, I'm guessing at some point you're going to be upgrading to Java 21. When you do, be sure to check out our playlist here. We go through, the upgrading like the steps you need to upgrade, all the new features, key features as well. I have a video on the performance enhancements between 17 and 21. So definitely check that out. And then all the other links I kind of talked about earlier in this presentation. And again, I'll link to this presentation as well. With that said, yeah, any more questions? Yep.
Where's Java heading as far as getting the primitive types versus those type wrappers?
Project Valhalla?
Yeah, like I can't make a generic on int. I have to do a check on the int picture or things like that.
Yeah. So yeah, the Project Valhalla. So that's still being worked on. I don't quite know the stats. Like we're getting closer to it on that. I don't exactly know. I don't know because like even the JDK engineers working on it don't quite exactly know when we're going to start getting good preview features on that. Again, we're getting close. Actually, Brian Getz he has a video. If you go to our YouTube channel, he calls postcards from the peak and complexity. So Project Valhalla has been like over a decade in the making, and people are like, why does it take a decade to do this and all? So he kind of really goes through that where, we initially had like one working prototype, but it was like really complex and difficult to use. And then we've constantly kind of gone through and refined it to make it easier to use and stuff like that. So it's a really great video to kind of explain why it's taking so long. I'm sure a lot of people are still like, why is it taking so long? But he kind of goes through that. And again, we're getting closer. But again, I can't quite say when. I could say a year from now, but it might still be more than a year from now. So I'm not quite sure. But yeah, that's the goal. Project Valhalla is to address a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned you had something of vector processing coming into the JDK later on.
The vector API.
Yeah. Is that are the vectors on the CPU?
Yeah.
Or on the graphics card? On the graphics card.
So that would be on the CPU. There is the Project Babylon for also running Java or being able to use Java to interact with the GPU. I haven't really done too much or worked with that project yet, but I do know that's a goal. Broadly, these are some goals are also about making Java be a better option for working with AI, like actually writing AI models. So it's like right now, Java would not be a good match at all for writing AI models because, all the reference types and all the overhead associated with reference types, but things like Project Valhalla, Vector API, Project Babylon, are the kind of and the foreign function and memory API are all kind of three things that would make potentially Java at some future point when all those are actually kind of finalized and implemented a much more practical choice for actually as a first party way for writing AI models as opposed to, just interacting with them through APIs. Yes. No, this is for computing vectors on the CPU. Yeah, not like the old vector thing. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. I don't know much beyond that. I've never done anything like that. So I'm like, yeah, vectors. So I'm kind of with, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've heard of open rewrite as a thing. Like I haven't really worked with it in anger. Like I don't know. I think one of the things, again, unfortunately, this is still in the future, so it's going to be not something until like really available until JDK 25. Whatever the classify API I was talking about earlier, that will make it to where upgrading between JDK versions less of a chore. Because like right now, like the one of the major problems is like when you upgrade between JDK versions, it's like you have to upgrade like all your so many of your underlying libraries. And sometimes you just need to do that just because of like you'll get the class version file issue even if like maybe the underlying thing that the class version file really hasn't changed between it below it. So like once a lot of these things that incorporate this new class file API, which will be kind of all in JDK 25, like, so again, obviously I realize it's a number of years in the future, like upgrading should be less of a chore. So it's not going to be necessarily so much of a case you have to upgrade all your underlying dependencies. Yeah, like I've heard of Open Rewrite. I haven't really worked with it in anger, so I can't really give an answer. You know, it's one of those things that sounds like vendor stuff, or you know, they'll do some sort of demonstration that's kind of like an idealized use case. You're like, oh, it's so much easier. But then, you know, when you actually work with it, it can be a lot more difficult. It can still be a great tool. I just don't know. But I think to other presentation I give, like fundamentally the thing that holds organizations back is FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like you just don't know what's going to happen. We know our code works right now in production, and if you start upgrading libraries, you just don't know. And fundamentally, the best way to address that is having a mature automated test suite to where it's like, okay, we know our code works now. If we update like this library, you know, and then we can run our test and we are very confident that if our test passed, that means the code is good. Then you can that's really the best way to go about it, is having a really good mature automated test suite. That said, that's a lot easier said than done. If you're working on some sort of 20-year-old application that has had 1,000 developers work on it and never had much more than spot automated testing, going back and writing automated test that, like, good luck. I feel that pain. I know that's, you know, but that's probably the real answer. But again, easier said than done. Any other questions? Yeah.
They did with the long-term and short-term releases. That has been a point of confusion for a lot of people who don't keep up with Java. You know, if you're at Java 8, why don't you go to Java 9? You know, it's plain. So that's a short-term and so on.
Yeah.
But now we need to go to 17. So
have we thought of? Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's been discussed, and like, no, we're not going to change it again. Because that would just end up creating more confusion if we ended up changing it again for something else. Because like initially, when we went to the 6-month release cadence, we were thinking on taking like a Linux, or is it just Ubuntu kind of naming, where it had been like, you know, releasing it would be like 2409, you know, that would have been released, or I guess 2309 would have been released earlier. This, you know, like that was, you know, originally one thought of it, but we ultimately decided to follow like the standard major minor version releasing. But yep. Yeah. Valid point. It's just one of those, like, there's just, for every, you know, solution or option, there's just downsides to the the other ones.
you know, 8 to 11 was 3, and then 11 to 17 was 6, and now what's it? 21, so that's 4.
Yeah. So yeah. So initially we were going to do every 3 years. There was going to be a LTS version, but then based upon kind of industry partners, like there was this like, oh, it'd be nicer if it was a little bit sooner if we had a new major version supported. Fundamentally, LTS isn't an OpenJDK concept. That is a vendor concept. So like that would be something Oracle or Red Hat or Azure or Microsoft would be doing for supporting. You know, technically, like if Microsoft wanted to support JDK 23 as a long-term support release, they could. They wouldn't, just because they would have to handle that all themselves without any of the other industry partners kind of contributing changes and stuff like that. So that's why they wouldn't do that. And other ecosystem reasons. But like I said, yeah, LTS isn't that. It was just that Oracle, we proposed saying like, hey, instead of doing it every 3 years, let's do it every 2 years. And, you know, because of us being the stewards of the language, while no one else was obligated to follow along, that's ultimately kind of what all the other vendors also decided to do. You have a question? Oh, yours. Okay. Any other questions then? Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming out. And I guess Bruce, you have a few
Okay,
closing
well,
statements?
thank you very much here, Billy, for the nice presentation. I think we can probably end the recording here now, and then we'll move on to the raffle.